My guest in this episode is Shaman John Paul Eagleheart Fischbach. As a site whisperer, he's visited over 100 sacred sites in various parts of the world, connecting to the spirits at those sites. And in this conversation, we explore a number of those sacred sites and the insights and wisdom that they offer. Hello, John Paul. Welcome back to the Possibility Hub video series. And I know you cover so many different areas, and one of those was site whispering. And we all connect to the land, yet you connect to the land and specific sites in a very different way. And I know you visited many, many sacred sites. So how did that come about that you discovered that the land and certain sites could give you messages?
Well, I think one of the very early ones was in Ireland at a place called Loch Gur. And I was at this sacred site called Loch Gur, which is this one. And it's a stone circle in Ireland. And I was just kind of tuning into this circle and wondering what it's all about. And suddenly I was in the middle of the matrilineal society that was there. And so this woman came over and she started talking to me, and I could ask her questions and she would answer my questions. And she talked about creativity and about how the circle was used, and that they were a matrilineal society, and how the women all would dream together, and that's how they made choices and decisions. I was like, wow, this is so great. And so I was with a traveling companion and I told her what was happening. And then they toured me around the site. These spirits said, oh, well, we'd like to show you up on the top of the hill where the birthing circle is. And so I walked up to the top of the hill where the birthing circle was, and suddenly there I was in the middle of this ceremony of women. They were unwinding the child from the mother and from the universe. And they were in this procession, and I was there watching. And these people were moving in and around me, and I was like, wow. And then it just continued, that I would go to a site. And some people that do this talk to like an omniscient spirit who, explains everything. And it's but I talk to the dude that's there. If it's Thursday, this is who I'm talking to. I remember one of the times in South Africa with Matthew, we were talking to someone and he had a bunch of questions that person didn't know. So they said, look, we'll go meet you at this other hill and I'll see if I can find someone that can answer those questions for you. So it's just this really extraordinary thing where I see the people who are there. So I dial into, I think, a frequency or a time that is specific to whatever I'm hunting for. So sometimes I try to ask and I say, I'd like to talk to one of the builders and see who I get. But oftentimes I just tune in and it's whoever's there.
So does this mean that each site has a guardian, or do you feel that you're tuning into a specific time and space whereby that being would be there?
I think it's more the latter. I don't feel that these are guardian spirits in any way, because sometimes we'll ask questions, when Michael Tellinger loves this and we do this, and they'll say, look, that's not my pay, it's above my pay grade. I don't know the answer to that. So they're just the person that's there. Are
you tuning into different time zones with each site? Some you're going back a long time. Have there been any sites where you've gone into the future?
No. Oh, that's it. We should try that. Let's give that a go. No, I never have. No, it's always been the past, or the very, very, very distant past.
So once you discovered this in Ireland, did that sort of inspire you, or were you tasked to go to other sacred sites?
A little of both. I think the universe conspired to send me off to various sites. And once I knew that this kind of worked, then I had a whole sort of shamanic ceremony for it. I would do the cleansing. I would call in the 7 directions. I would do a whole sort of, almost, like a vision quest ceremony to prepare to ask for, well, you ask for permission when you go to a site anyway. And then I've always added to that, look, if there's anybody that has anything, any wisdom to share or would be happy to share information, I would love to learn. And then I kind of wait, and then, oh, right, okay, here we go.
So I'd love to learn, and I'm sure our viewers would love to learn from some of the sacred sites that you've been around. So, and hear some of the messages and understand the purpose of some of those sites, and maybe see how it's relevant to us today. So what are some of the most impactful sites that you visited?
Well, when we started this documentary, my producer said, can you make a list of all the sites you've whispered? And I'm like, I'll give it a go. So I did my best, and we're up to 141 sites.
So there's a lot to choose from.
There's a lot to choose from. So I thought in scanning through that, I thought there's a couple of things. There's experiences that taught me more about the universe and our history than I ever was prepared to accept. So that's, I thought we could visit some of those sites. And then there's some sites that really explained things that were beautiful. So Loch Gur, for example, was my first time to understand what a matrilineal, matriarchal society, how it functioned. And so a couple of the really awesome things were they just had such incredible respect for creativity. So they said, and the artifacts that they find have been confusing to the archaeologists because they can't say this is the Loch Gur style. So they thought they were just a huge trading, that they did lots of trade and commerce because there was such a variety of shields and different artifacts. And the women that I spoke to said, no, but if once you made something, why would you make the same thing again? Let's explore, let's be creative, let's, invent new things. So I thought that was really interesting. And she said, well, that's even the way we live. She said, why would you as a woman ever have a child by the same man twice?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. I said, what would be the point of that?
Been
so
there,
that was, yeah. So I thought that was really, really interesting. And then she talked about how they managed their agricultural fields, that it was up to the women, that it was the women that determined when it was time to let the field lay fallow to regenerate, and when it was time to grow something. And the women did that they had dreaming groups. So they had various groups of women, and they would all have the intention of what the issue was for the community. So if the issue of the community was drought, then this particular group of women would know that that's the issue they're trying to solve. And so they would dream together to solve the problem. They would all go into the dream time together. And these, largely it was groups of 12 women. And out of those dreams, they would know what to do.
So did they dream in a particular way, John Paul? Did they dream in a particular way, or did they just agree that when we dream, we will connect?
They just knew that this was the problem. So, we're dreaming about the drought situation. We're dreaming about this particular field. So they would know the issue, and then they would counsel about their dreams. And out of the 12 versions of their answers, they would know what to do, and they would lead the community. But it was the respect they had for the women's ability to dream and to have wisdom come in dreams. And I know that in so much of the work that I've done with grandmothers around the planet, it is trusting the dream. And I think women have a really beautiful ability to dream in, much more practical ways than I've ever heard any of the grandfathers do.
Oh, wow. Gosh, that's wisdom for us straight away. I love that. For what reason would you create the same thing twice? Or in terms of creation, And specifically when we look at the world today, you know, somebody has an idea and then they manufacture it, and another company copies it or creates something similar, rather than always looking for, you know, something new, something different. And that's already given me some answers. That feels very right, in terms of what I always look for, putting out into the world, things that haven't been heard or seen before, rather than doing what everybody else is doing, being, you know, when you're often called a little bit left of center, yet it's about birthing something new into the world and using your dream time to create that. That's stunning wisdom already. Thank you.
Yeah. So it was such respect for the whole birthing process, the whole gestation process, the dream. It was just understanding. And, you know, this is a matriarchal society that lasted for thousands of years.
Yes. So it obviously worked. It worked beautifully for them.
Yeah.
So what are some other sites that you visited?
I thought one of the other things I think was interesting was to understand about time.
Yes.
So this is an Aboriginal site. So it's just north of Sydney, called Bulgandry. And Bulgandry is just this area, and there's this rock art. So you can see this little character.
Yes.
In the rock art. And this is just an area flat on the ground. And there's just lots. There's whales and kangaroos and other kinds of fish. And there's all kinds of things into the rock. So I go there. And as I say, typically I go and I, you know, sort of tune in and say hello. And, you know, I'm quite experienced at it now, so I don't have to do the full ceremony anymore. So I go and I'm like, and there's nothing. I got nothing. There's nobody. Nobody's there. I'm waiting and nothing. I'm like, well, that's really weird. This is truly never happened that I've gone to a site and there's nothing. Sometimes if you go to a really popular site, it's very hard to access anything. Like Stonehenge, it's very difficult to talk to anybody because it's just there's too much energy. Anyway, so I'm like, well, I don't know. So I look over to the side and there's some grooves in the rock where they show you where they have sharpened stone tools for, you know, hundreds of years. That's the little grinding place and the grooves and the thing. So I look there and there's a man there, a spirit, a guy who's sharpening a tool. And so I greet him and say hello. And he says, hello. And I said, can I ask you about the art over here? And he said, yeah, why? And I said, well, I'm just curious, you know, what these things mean or the significance of them. And he said, that was stuff created by our kids.
Yes. Yeah, I've often wondered about, are they really as significant as we, you know, we place our hope that they are significant when, yes, of course, they'd have children who didn't have paper to draw on the rocks in the sand and things like that.
Yeah, so he said, you know, this was a perfect thing to occupy the kids for days and days and days. So he said so the signage at the site tells you that this is a shaman. It's a special shaman, and he's got all these tools. And the guy said to me, no, this is a brother and sister doing a picture of their father. Their father was out hunting, so they drew a picture of their hunter father. And he said, look, some of the art, you know, some of the children were quite, you know, realistic in what they drew. And there's some kangaroos that look very realistic. And then there's some stuff like this. And it was just so refreshing to hear that everything is, as you say, everything is not deeply sacred. That, you know, this is just how they lived. So I was with an elder at the time, and she was curious about the plants. And he said to me, well, look, I don't know enough about the plants. Let me get my wife. So he scampered over to the side of the bush, and he came back with another spirit woman. And she said, okay, you want to know about the plants? And so Auntie Barb and she talked about the plants a bit. And then she said to us, how did you come to talk to us? And we said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And she said, did my son call you? And I looked at Auntie Barb and she looked at me and thought, no, sorry, no. And she said, oh, I thought maybe you came to as spirits because we look like spirits to them in their timeline. So she said, well, when spirits come, it's often that he's gone to get them for healing. So we thought you were spirits that came to heal my son. And again, we looked at each other and said, no. And she said, well, can you heal him? And so Auntie Barb, with all of her indigenous experience and knowledge, you just say yes. There's no excuses. You just say, oh, sure, well, I'll do what I can. So we follow the spirit woman across the rocks to an area, and there's the little boy sitting, and he's got very deformed legs. So the legs just never quite grew correctly. And so they're bent and they're not quite, and so he can't walk on them. And so Auntie Barb, I explained to Auntie Barb where his legs are, and she puts her hands and she can feel this. So she can feel where the energy of his legs. And then he says, I can feel, Mom, I can feel her. Auntie Barb's energy. So we had this beautiful thing, and Auntie Barb said to him, he said, I'm feeling strong. And she said to the little boy in spirit, there's lots of ways to feel strong. So it was this beautiful cheers, and it was just a gorgeous little healing. But how bizarre. There we were in our 2021 time frame dimension, doing a healing on a spirit from hundreds of years ago, probably. So then that made me think, well, how does this work? That, what have we altered the timeline? Have we screwed up, have we interfered with the flow of linear time? And the answer we got was, well, no, it's only the eternal now.
Totally.
There is only now.
And
so I thought that.
Doesn't it open up the possibility in terms of, we all know about distance healing, that if healers get together and focus, you don't need to be in the same room. You just send the intention. I mean, Lynn McTaggart's done many intention experiments, which categorically prove that, we can send distance healing and get a result. And now this opens the door to the possibility of sending healing or being the healer in different time-space realities. And what I loved there was the fact that you appeared as spirits to them, and they appeared as spirits to you. So there's bleed-throughs of different realities, because it's all different, slight different angular rotational spins. There's so many nows here, but yes, that opens the door to now, and then looking at how do we change our present by healing up the past or healing up situations and issues that people had in the past, and does that change the timeline that they find themselves in the now? I mean, it opens the door to so many beautiful questions, John Paul, doesn't it?
Yes, and the timeline, is there really such a thing? Is that just a construct that made it easy for us? But there is no such thing.
Yes. Well, we all know there's now, and I must say, in recent times, as I look back at what I was taught at school, and I find how irrelevant it is, the teaching paradigm to sit behind a desk, literally learn by rote, and that everything I learned, I cannot see the reflection of where it is now. I mean, I was taught about arable farming in northern Spain, and I can honestly say I've never really had to use that and I cannot see a use for it, and so it's made me question everything now, to the point where, what can you trust? You're in the present, you're in the now. This is it. That's all you can trust, not what people say your history was or wasn't, because we were taught a history that may or may not be true. And then, I love the looking for meaning in images on walls, and with that image you've got behind you. Actually, when you showed it to me, the first thing that came to mind is, it looks like a child's photograph, but it also, with the one hand in the circle, looks like somebody's playing table tennis or tennis racket.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't look like anything, and
No,
it wasn't.
no. I think he said that was a bird snare.
Okay.
I remember correctly. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those times where I think, okay, it's comfortable for us to think about the timeline, to think about past and future. But what I think we're being called for in this ascension that we're all going to go through is that that's just not going to have there's no purpose to a timeline at all. And I think, well, what happens if I go there to a site and I tune in and I'm catching this slice of now?
Yes.
Much easier for me than to think, well, what do they do when I'm not here? Well, that's an irrelevant question because it's just a different slice of now. It isn't 5,000, 10,000 years ago, because sometimes the spirits can, if I'm there long enough, we can kind of do a bit of a mind meld. You know, if I'm asking interesting questions about, you know, the future or stuff, and they often say, I don't know. I can tell you about the time that we were here, but I can't really tell you past that. Because that wasn't part of their lived experience. That wasn't part of their now. I'm like, that's interesting.
Well, I'm going to challenge you to call in spirits from the future at a couple of sites that you'll be going to in the future. Well, if you've got any coming up, that'll be interesting. Yeah. So what other sites have you gotten messages for us today?
So we could do another time one, or, well, let's talk about the other thing that was phenomenal that happened to me was I was up in the wilds of the Orkney Islands of Scotland. So it's one of the most extraordinary archaeological digs that's happening in the world right now. And they have found this site. So this isthmus of land that you're seeing behind me it has salt water on one side and fresh water on the other.
Wow.
And they've started digging and they have found this, and this is of course an artist's rendering of what they think the site might have been like. But there's all these large buildings. And the peculiar thing is that there's no evidence of people living there. So there's no typical things that you would find if these were houses. So this was some sort of ceremonial place, but it's a huge mystery. So it's a big archaeological dig at the moment. So another friend and I were traveling there. And so I decided, well, I have to go do my site whisper thing and see what I can find. So I go into the archaeological dig and I crawl into one of the places where they're digging. It's all covered because we're there in the off season. So it's all covered in plastic, but I jump down into there and I do my thing. And suddenly I'm in one of these buildings. So I'm inside one of these buildings and it's like a classroom. And there are people listening to a lecture. And this particular lecture is explaining different kinds of healing energy work. And so I'm looking around I can hear the lecture going on and I can see the students listening, but there's no person delivering the lecture. But I kind of am looking and I see this kind of green gaseous cloud, kind of this vapor. And I realize that it's the vapor that's talking. I'm like, what? What's that? So as a native shaman, my whole focus has been about the earth. It's not, alien schmalien, it's about the earth.
Okay.
And so I've never been a big one on understanding anything about alien races or even going there or investigating or anything, because it's about the earth and the plants and the animals, and that I can do. A green gaseous cloud, I'm a little confused. So the lecture's finished and the students all leave and the gaseous thing says, are you okay? And I said, yes, I think so. And it was a male voice. And he said, I can take another form if that would be easier on you. And I said, no, I'm okay. I can go with this. Okay.
Wondering what form it would take.
Yes. So then I said, so then he said, well, I don't have a class next, so I can take you around. So he took me to the admissions office, and they were different people in different tribes were sending young people from all over Europe to this mystery school. And it was a very famous, very well established mystery school. And this was the university. This was a giant, big mystery school university. So there were women's studies, and there was this incredible lecture that I only got the last part of it about understanding the energy that women bring into their bodies in the act of sex. And that they bring this energy in, and then they have to do work to get the energy out so they can return back to their core frequency. It's like, wow, that's an important lesson for everyone to understand that the commingling of energy happens, and that's part of sexual congress. But that once that's finished, there's work that they were all being taught to just shed all of that energy that isn't yours. So that was fascinating. And then that was being delivered by a blue gaseous kind of thing. So we were out in between buildings, and I said, so what are you? And he said, well, you would know of us from your knowledge of ancient Mesopotamia and Sumeria. And I said, okay, I know what those words are, but I don't have vast knowledge of this. And he said, well, we're not from here. And I said, well, no. And he said, no, we're not from this earth. I'm like, okay. So he said, so that was the first time that I had to accept that there are beings from, other planets that have come to help us. So he said, well, we came here because the women at the end of this isthmus had a mystery school. And he said they had it for many hundreds of years, and they were doing really, really beautiful work, and they were ready to take it to the next level. So we've come to various places on the earth to help establish these schools and help educate people when they're ready to understand how energy works and how to move stones and how to levitate things. Okay.
Oh, take me there.
So I crawl out of this and I get into the car with my friend, and I said, aliens. And she said, what do you mean? I said, like extra ETs, these are people from another galaxy or somewhere. And my friend, really? I said, so, luckily I had done enough sight whispering by that point to just trust that this is what I get. So it was the real turning point for me to go, well, I can't deny this. I can't pretend that this didn't happen. So, okay, aliens, let's go.
Now, when you visit a site like that and you find out that it's like a mystery school and there's lessons going on, I know if this were me, I'd be, can I go back? Can I study here? Can I go back tomorrow and the next day? Is there a class curriculum? When can I go? I'd be like wanting to stay at that site. Do you get that as well? I mean, I'd just be like,
I do. So I did go back. The weird part for me is that I'm always doing this as I travel. So the opportunity to just sort of stay there and come every day, I've never had that because I'm always traveling and there's a bit of an itinerary, or I've got someone that I'm traveling with. So it doesn't happen, but I did go back to this place. I did two other quick run-ins. And so I got to see other parts of it. I got to understand more about the different population of the students. We got to, on the second or third trip, I got to go to a workshop, and they were making a healing tool, and they had stone, a particular kind of stone, and it was kind of like an axe head, like a two-sided axe head, but they weren't sharpened. They were just smooth, And then they had to make this hole in the middle and then put the wood through the hole to hold it. But it was a healing tool. And it was you put the stones on the body and you would drag it down the body and you would drag it down meridian lines. And because of the wood, it was like, they said it was like a resistor. So it didn't overwhelm the person. And that quite often it was very difficult to make these tools because the stone was quite fragile. And so lots of the axe, they would break when they would be doing their hole, they would just break in half. So we were that evening, we were at a restaurant and talking to someone about the dig at the Ness of Brodgar. And they were part of one of the volunteer archaeological digs. And they said, yeah, it's really confusing. At one of the buildings I was working on, we just found all of these broken axe heads. And they're like, yeah, really small. They're like toy. I said, like toy axe heads. They were really little, but there were so many of them broken in half. And I said, I wanted to say, well, that's just the students in the workshop. They couldn't always perfect them. They were students. They, that's why there were so many, because that was the place where you built that tool.
Oh, incredible. Gosh, it must be so tempting to say, well, this is what they're for, and knowing that you cannot, else you'll be ridiculed or they won't believe you, because again, they come from a particular model of the world. Oh gosh, that's really an interesting site and definitely somewhere to go. I've also heard that there's similar mystery schools and teaching sites, as you said, different places of the world. I know there's one in Hawaii. Which is a very important one as well, because I know certain people who have actually been taken there and have studied, and I know part of your initiation was on the island of Kauai as well. So give us another place.
Well, I think one of the things that I seem to find the women's things,
yes,
and I find the mystery schools. So in I didn't think to bring pictures of that. So we'll do this one. So when I was with our buddy, Matthew Ryan, we went to places near where he lives in Taos. And this is a place called Bandelier. And so you climb up this incredible ladder for a very long distance. And at the top of the ladder, we met this particular alcove. But as we got to the top of the ladder, there were two spirits standing there who were the teachers of this particular mystery school up here. So it was up here because you didn't want it down where the rest of the populace was. And there were these two. So Matthew asked them, well, what were they teaching? And they said, well, we were.
Matthew could see them as well.
He could feel them.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether he could see them when we were at Sankawi and we did a Kiva experience together. I think at this one, I think he could feel them and I think he could hear them. I'm sorry, I don't really remember. But they were telling us that they were there and it was the school where you ask the big questions. Why are we here? What's it all about? Where did we come from? What happens when we die? And this was kind of a school of philosophy in our language. They didn't use that word, but they said it was where the big questions were. So Matthew said, well, why are we here? And they said, well, we will never answer that question for you. You must answer that question. And they said, the reason we're good at this school is we are good at asking you the questions so you follow your own wisdom and you follow your own sense of knowing and you develop your own answers. And they said, we'll help steer you, but we will never give you the answer because that's our truth. That's not your truth. I thought that was just so extraordinary.
Yes, and so correct in, frustrating at times when it's just tell me. Yet, it is for certain teachers or mentors at specific times to open the door. And then you're the one who has to walk through. I know with a lot of the work that I do, it's very much do with rather than do to, in terms of even hypnosis. You can't do it if people don't want to accept the instruction to close your eyes. You can't go and here, shut your eyes. they have to want to accept those instructions. So I love that it really actually all comes down to, you know, our choice, and our realizing the beautiful beings we are in terms of the wisdom that we have. Yet sometimes we feel blocked and cannot open to that.
Yep, yep. No, it was extraordinary to say that that's what a school was. It wasn't, you know, we said at the start of our chat about rote learning.
Yes, yes. These are true places and true schools of learning, knowledge, wisdom, and allowing you to bring that forth. And, you know, yes, it's just so bang on track with what I said earlier, that we're sort of taught not to think. In fact, we're taught not to think for ourselves, not to search out for our own truth, our own wisdom.
Yep, yep. That makes me lead to this one. So across from Bandelier is another site called Sankowi. And these are pot shards that are all 500 plus years old. And the ground is literally littered like this. And so Matthew and I are walking along and we come to this area where there's just so many of these pot shards, and they're just beautiful, all these little patterns. But there's a ridiculous number of them, you know, thousands and thousands of pot shards in this one particular area.
Sounds like maybe it was Greek and they were just doing the smashing play routine.
No, they were. So we said, you know, I tuned in and there was a woman who was a potter from this period. And so she showed us her designs. So the little one with the dots, so it's well, my hand's not going the right direction.
Yes.
Or the other way. Okay, that one with the lines and the dots just over my head. Yeah, that's her particular, was one of her designs, was that pot. And so we said, well, why so many broken here? And I think this is just so beautiful. And she said, well, as an artist, I'm looking at my pot and I'm deciding to decorate it. So I reach into the universe and I ask for a pattern and design. And a pattern and a design comes to me and it comes through me and through my heart and into my hands, and I decorate my pot. And when that pot is done and it's lived its life, or it gets chipped or something, I have to break it because I want to release that creativity back into the universe for someone else to use.
How beautiful, linking back to the first site in Ireland. And the women said, why would you create the same thing?
Oh, yeah.
Also to release the creativity, to allow it to circulate rather than be stuck.
Yeah, because he said, you know, that creativity, I have now fused it into this pot. So I'm holding this creativity in this container. So I break the container to release the creativity again. Like, I love that.
What beautiful wisdom we have today.
Yes. So I guess that the final one should either be, do you want giants or the Anunnaki?
You choose. Giants.
Giants, okay. So I don't know if you, I don't think you've been there to the Giants Playground.
Which
in KZN, in South Africa.
No.
It's in KZN though.
No, not yet.
So Claire Yanish, did you meet Claire?
No, I haven't. I think she's on our group, isn't she?
Yes, on one of the most spectacular women brains on the planet. Anyway, Claire said to me, hey, listen, you know, next time you come down, I want you to come and check out these weird rocks by me. I'm like, mm-hmm. So if Claire is saying there's some weird rocks that you should check out, you should go check out these rocks. Well, so these are larger than a person. I don't know if you can tell by the size of the trees, but they're pretty big. And they're all in incredible formations. Like there's a whole ring of these boulders. And they're just these incredible, huge, huge, huge rocks. So she says, so we go, and she said, you know, would you come? So we truck out early in the morning, and it's in the middle of a horrible plantation. And they've just planted all these trees in among these incredible boulders. There were obviously some kind of a sacred site. So we tune in, I tune in, and lo and behold, it's giants. So again, I'm like, I've just wrapped my brain around aliens. Now I have to wrap my brain around giants. Oh my God, okay, let's go. All right, we'll do giants. So the giants explain that they were brought here to help with the mining operations by the Anunnaki, and they were given this territory. And the territory was theirs, and they could live there and raise their children, and it was fine. And the Anunnaki wouldn't bother them, and you could be here and don't worry about it. This is your area. And then at the very end of it all, when everyone had to get off the planet because they screwed things up and the human race was a mess. And anyway, at the exit, the giants had created this particular area as kind of like a little transistor radio. So again, for a giant, they were, I think they said 15 of Claire. So Claire is about 5 feet. So if you're 15 of her, you're what, 60 feet-ish tall? So that's about a 6-story building?
Wow.
These are big. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So this was a device that they had created using these stones to be able to communicate off planet. So they're lined up like a circuit board. And the energy moving from one to the next makes a circuit. And that's how they could communicate back home to wherever. And that the reason that works is because this particular stone, which is called dolerite, and the properties of the dolerite means that the earth will participate in this communication device. So it was Claire and a couple other people that were there, and I'm doing my thing, and this is what the giants are telling me. And they want to understand more about this dolerite and what are these rocks and what does that mean and how does it work? So the giant says to me, well, you should probably just ask the rocks. I'm like, ask the rocks? What do you mean? I'm like, well, we have, you're tapping into our consciousness, just tap into the consciousness of the rocks.
Of course.
Do what? Do what? So I go, all right, let's see if I can dial into the consciousness of the dolerite rocks. So it was the most extraordinary experience. So now I'm channeling, sight whispering to the dolerite. So the dolerite explains that when Gaia was building the planet, when she was figuring out all the things to make this planet this incredible school of unconditional love that it is, lots of consciousnesses in the universe wanted to participate. This sounds like a cool project. I'd like to be involved, So dolerite helped establish the energy lines of the grid work of ley lines or whatever lines there are, telluric lines. So that was dolerite's thing, was these lines of communication, and wanted to help the planet have these direct, clear lines of communication built into the structure of the planet. So Gaia said, So Gaia said, sure, that would be great. I'd love that help. So the consciousness that was dolerite helped in the formation of the planet to get these lines established on the planet, but fell so in love with the project and said, this is such a beautiful thing. And this whole unconditional love project, I want it to succeed. I think this is beautiful. I want to stay here. I don't want to just return to just pure consciousness. I'd like to take physical form here. So the agreement was made that it could condense itself into the form of this mineral. Okay. So that's the purpose of this dolerite. So when the giants came, it was dolerite because it has this piezoelectric ability. It was the perfect thing for them to build this radio transmitting place. So then we jump from so now I'm jumping between talking to the dolerite, talking to the giants, and everyone's minds are just kind of like, okay, sure, all right. So then someone said, does this still operate? And the giant said, well, it doesn't look like it, but I think if you stand between the rocks, you can still feel the frequency run between the stones. So when you stand between the two tall ones right here,
yes,
it is a full body electrical, hair stands up, goosebump situation. When you stand between these rocks, it is unbelievable what goes on if you stand between them or you crouch between some of them. And it's just the most incredible sensation. And I think that we felt that there was incredible healing potential for that, that if you could lay on some of those stones, and when you lay on them, you just melt into the stone, and you can just feel all the electrical alignments from all the meridians start to just straighten up. Was the sensation we had was it was like your meridians get straightened out, that it just runs. So it's like acupuncture without needles.
and of course, if your meridian lines are straightened out, then the energy can flow through you so much more effectively and efficiently, which means healing takes place more easily, because what is dis-ease? It's, energy not able to flow freely through your cells, through your body in different ways. Oh, how wonderful. How wonderful.
Yeah. So that's the giants playground. So yeah, it's been an incredible experience of learning. And I think one of the things that my biggest takeaway is the universe, the world that we inhabit is far more fascinating than anything I could have imagined. I mean, I started thinking, well, yeah, I can talk to the animals and the trees, and that's all lovely, and Mother Earth and Pachamama, and I get all that. Okay, aliens. All right. Okay, we got aliens. Okay, giants. Okay, we've got giants. Okay, we've got the stone people, and in indigenous culture, they're always called the stone people. They're never called the rocks. They're called the stone people.
Yes.
I just always thought that was just charming.
No, and it gives you an appreciation to see that everything has consciousness in a completely different way from how we may view consciousness in the sort of forms that we are. And I have loved the wisdom that you've brought forward from all these sites today. I mean, we go back to Ireland and the women saying, in terms of creativity and dreaming together to create a solution. But in terms of creativity, once you've created something, let it go. You don't want to create the same thing twice. It's always about evolution. And then we had the insights in time, of healing across time. So not just across space, which is what we talk about here, distance healing, but also across times. This is the beauty of healing up the ancestral line and this is the reason that it changes you, because if you've healed back in time, and there is no time, it's all now, then of course your now moment shifts and changes. And then those beautiful mystery schools and the tools that we would dismiss as sort of worthless facts, but actually, different models of healing and the way that we were taught in terms of in Taoist to the teachers ask the right questions, so you open up to new possibilities within yourself. And then the broken pieces of stone, and once it's chipped or broken, breaking it so that you release the creativity and keep that evolution of movement and energy. And then right here with these stones, opening up the meridian lines and allowing everything to flow so beautifully. I mean, I'm sure there's even more wisdom that we've covered today, but those were some of the salient points that I remember that have really inspired me today, really inspired me. What a beautiful gift you have to be able to go to these sites and see and speak through time and bring that forward into our now moment. Just incredible, John Paul. Yes.
Well, that's what started the whole idea for the documentary series, was to say, well, let's go to these sites. And, you know, when we're at the Giants playground, let's work with a geologist that can explain what are the piezoelectric properties of dolerite. I know that word, but I don't know what it really is. And what does it mean, you know, for mass and shape? And let's talk to some of the Bushmen that lived in this site and used this as a teaching place. And let's pull all of that together as best we can. Let's look at an archaeoastronomy. Where do these stones point to?
Yes.
What are the shadows created when the sun rises or sets across these three? What happens then? What stars are aligned to them? Yeah.
So many connections to make, and I look forward to our next discussion when we'll take this even further into some of the other areas of work that you do. So, John Paul, thank you so much for being with the Possibility Hub today. Thank you.